is the following. Did the execution of this war accomplish two goals that some people cite, among them Bernard Lewis, Tom Friedman, and others? A, it showed that the United States was willing to respond. This was not Somalia, this was not Beirut. It was a nation willing to respond, and it did it, and it showed its use of its military might, and some argue it has had significant influence in the region, contrary to what was being argued at the time by those who opposed the action. And secondly, it may in some way have led to where we are now with respect of the Middle East negotiation between Israel and Palestine, with the president taking a significant role. Is that, in hindsight, a positive benefit of this war?
I think it's quite naive to believe either of those two things. First of all, the word respond is inappropriate. The invasion of Iraq is not a response to 9/11 because Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. At least it certainly hasn't been demonstrated to have anything to do with 9/11.
Had a lot to do with Al-Qaeda.
Now on the larger point, is it...
I'm not arguing with 9/11. I'm not arguing with 9/11. Right. I'm arguing just an opportunity that the United States here took a chance to show.
Well, Tom Friedman said we have to fight some Arabs, basically. Right. We have to show the Arabs are willing to fight the Arabs so that they change their minds about we're not wimps. Well, if you look at the study that was published yesterday by the Pew Center about the attitudes of the world, George Bush is considered to be a greater danger to peace, not only than Saddam Hussein was, but even than Osama bin Laden is.
Well, wouldn't you say that was a bit naive? Well, would you say that was a bit naive? Not to say preposterous, not to say conducted how by the Pew Center, knowing what world opinion is? I mean,
well,
what
yes,
a ridiculous
it's all of these
position to take.
things. It's all of these things, and yet it is a direct result of the United States' willingness to bully the entire world.
But let me ask you:
do you believe
that George Bush is a greater threat to peace?
Of course, I don't believe it. What I'm saying is that this
cite it somehow as some.
No, I'm saying because it's a reality you have to deal with. Because of this invasion, George Bush has made the rest of the world feel as if the United States is a greater threat to peace than this grand terrorist, than these killers.
Right. Well, you know what it took.
And it's absolutely
Eric
ridiculous.
You know what
it's a fact of life.
You know what it took to make people feel warm and fuzzy and friendly towards the United States. The day they felt that was when New Yorkers were up to here in the human remains and burning garbage and looked vulnerable and sad.
No.
That's people like you then. They don't like you when you want to say, right, that's the last time that happens.
These opinions were very high in the United States. During the Clinton administration, the world had a very high opinion of the United States, because that's simply false. The numbers have tumbled under George W. Bush.
The masochism of people who say we should behave as if we're in pursuit of popularity totally defies me. Mr. Zarqawi comes all the way from Afghanistan, one of the most wanted people of Al-Qaeda, to Baghdad for what he says is medical treatment. I can tell you, anyone can tell you, Baghdad is as hard a city to enter as it is to leave, or was in those days. No one but Saddam Hussein takes a decision about having a senior Al-Qaeda fugitive into the country. There were Al-Qaeda clones all over northern Iraq and Kurdistan trying to kill the independent Kurdish leadership. Saddam Hussein has boasted openly, and did boast openly over a long period, of paying for the suicide bombers and the jihadists I'm just replying to
others
this.
Others were paying the families of suicide bombers.
It's now been openly boasting, a major regime that says we support jihadist rejectionism.
Well,
I'm just replying to those who say... There are already American forces in Pakistan and in Saudi Arabia, so that's a frivolous comparison.
Let me turn it again one more time, Eric. The other argument that is being made is...
Totally frivolous comparison.
And I heard this because we, as you both know, did a lot of programs during this war. The argument was frequently heard of the preemptive action, that this country should not be engaged in preemptive action. And if you support the war in Iraq, you're endorsing just that kind of strategy.
That's why the argument of my book is that the big strategic mistake of Western statecraft was to reconfirm Saddam Hussein in power in 1991. That the chance to finish off what had been begun by the emancipation of Kuwait from his aggression, and to prevent him completing the genocide of the Kurds.
It's a sleight of hand in which you're saying, look, this was an extension of his invasion of Kuwait, so therefore, since we didn't do it when he invaded Kuwait, we're going to use the Kuwait invasion as our incentive to respond again.
Be fair, Charlie, we have been talking about who was right when and at what point, have we not?
Right.
So I'm saying this would be it's a feasible take on it. We could have seen a country that was already 12 years into nation building where perhaps more than 100,000 of its better citizens would still be alive who were killed in the intervening period.
Well,
and where the economy and society were put under an appalling strain.
It's still a total
and where it was we made very plain that Saddam Hussein was a threat to his own people and to others. So I'm sorry, I think that the war didn't begin, which was, after all, Eric's argument. The war did not begin, cobbled together suddenly by a load of propaganda in March of this year. It began in August of 1990 when Saddam Hussein tried to destroy, remove from the map, a neighboring Arab and Muslim state.
Well, if Christopher were right,
it should have been finished earlier than it was.
If Christopher were right about that, then all of those countries that were genuinely part of a coalition in 1991 would have joined the United States, and none of them did. So it seems to me to be purely tautological. And in fact, this is the first time in history that a democracy has made this argument that it has the right to make a preemptive war against another
Actually, that isn't true
and
either.
I wonder if India is going to do the same thing to Pakistan and cite you and George Bush as its moral authority.
As a point of fact, there were several countries who did support the coalition in this case, who weren't in a position to have their own foreign policy in 1991, such as Poland and the Czech Republic. But it would generally be true that some people...
The Czech Republic did not support it. After Václav Havel left office, the Czech Republic reversed its support.
Excuse me, I saw Czech chemical protection teams investigating the Iraqi
They
missiles
were not
that
part
fell,
of the coalition.
that
Klaus
fell
took
in
them
that
out.
fell into Kuwait. Which, by the way, I'd like to know.
And by the way, the
missiles
Czech
that Saddam.
people
I didn't
were
interrupt
against
you
it as
once.
well.
That Saddam. I'd like to know whether Saddam Hussein is allowed under the Blitz rules just to fire missiles into Kuwait City as he did for the first few weeks of the war. Probably under the Blitz rules, he would have been. It's true that some coalition members said we're only going as far as the recuperation of Kuwait, but they wanted to be legalistic about it. I'm sorry, as I say, I'm making my own case. I'm saying I don't have to be bound by the cases other people make. I repeat, it would have been better, especially having incited an insurrection among Iraqis and Kurds in 1991, not to abandon them and to help them to finish the job. And I think I can rest with perfect moral and factual confidence on that conclusion.
Well, I'm out of time. Stop. Let me ask you this, Christopher. You've just described essentially a long, short war. You've just given us a quick synopsis of the thesis of this book. Do you think Eric is right about when he says what liberal media, that this whole notion of the liberal tint of the media in America is wrong?
No, I think there's a bias towards consensus in the media. I mean, Eric's right that there's a huge bias in a certain area like cable television. Forth. Well, not that I watch much of this stuff, but my impression of it from going on it is that there's a fair bit. Hoping to sell this book myself to many right-wingers that way.
I'm just trying to get you to help sell Eric's book.
How can I, I haven't read all of his book. How do I know that the New York Times has an ideological position that's reflected in its
coverage,
coverage on Iraq, on arms control, on gun control, on abortion and on affirmative action? I know because I can read. Whether it's a bias or not, and if it deserves to be called a bias, it's the culture of the newspaper.
I think his argument is not so much that there may be a certain bias in news coverage of certain institutions, certain news institutions, but that their pervasiveness is wrong.
Well, basically the argument is you can find bias on just about any issue you want because the media is so vast and unruly, but that really conservatives should stop whining. They've basically won the game. There are certain liberal biases in certain places. Maybe you'll find some in the New York Times, but the overwhelming bias is now favorable to conservatives. By the very fact that, you know, Christopher thinks...
I would make the argument, I'm not sure why that's true. I'm not sure why that's true, and most people believe with you that it is true. Especially in talk radio and certainly parts of cable television. I don't know why it's true, and if I accept the fact that it is true, it would seem to me that that's simply the fault of liberals, that there are liberals that ought to be every bit as good at being both good performers and sharp thinkers on television and being able to articulate a point of view that would resonate with America.
Well, part of it is certainly...
Unless the dominant political thinking in America reflects where the media you're talking about is.
Part of it is certainly true. I mean, part of it is absolutely the liberals' fault. You're right. Yeah. But I wonder, Charlie, you and I, and Christopher too, know a lot of very articulate liberal writers. Rick Hertzberg, Frank Rich, Paul Krugman, David Remnick. None of them have regular TV gigs. E.J. Dionne, Richard Cohen. Yet virtually every single conservative pundit has a regular. Every single neocon, it's sort of a birthright of neocon to have your own television gig. 100% of cable is conservative, as is talk radio. Now, maybe conservatives are better at it. Maybe they're better organized. I think they are, in fact. But why is the domination so overwhelming in these places?
You have thoughts on that?
No, don't watch enough of the stuff, actually.
Yeah, I don't know.
I just don't watch enough of it. Maybe that's the answer.
Thank you. Good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Good to
John.
see you.